Hey, Southern Nevada, let's talk about your tap water. Despite its hard, mineral-rich taste, your water surpasses drinking standards, so don't confuse hard water with its quality. Sourced from the Rocky Mountains, your water is analyzed more than 328,000 times a year and treated and monitored 24/7 by a team of technical experts. Learn more about the testing of your water at snwa.com. SNWA is a not-for-profit water agency. Hey y'all, executive producer Layla Mohammed here. Vegas residents know hard work, but you don't have to do it all yourself. TaskRabbit has been helping locals in the Neon City for over a decade with everything from furniture assembly to minor home repairs. Don't let that to-do list run your weekend. Use the TaskRabbit app to describe what you need and find a skilled tasker in your neighborhood who can take it off your plate. You'll see the hourly rate up front, so there's no surprises at checkout. Download the TaskRabbit app or visit taskrabbit.com today to get those home to-dos crossed off.
New data centers are headed for Southern Nevada. Is that a good thing? How power and water hungry are these facilities exactly? So today on CityCast Las Vegas, we sit down with reporter Alan Halali from the Review-Journal to find out if the Southern Nevada desert is ready for what's coming. It's Wednesday, April 8th. I'm Sonia Cho Swanson, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. So, Alan, what exactly is coming down the pipeline in terms of data centers? Are we about to see a deluge of these giant switch-like complexes in Southern Nevada?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a big boom, I guess, so to speak, in Southern Nevada and Northern Nevada. When we're talking about these big AI data centers, more so Northern Nevada, because there are less guardrails than there are here in Southern Nevada. We have some of these safeguards, including a ban on evaporative cooling, which is those big swamp coolers that use up all this water. There's a huge effort here with the Southern Nevada Water Authority to recycle all of our indoor water use. And that's one of the areas where that water goes into the atmosphere. We can't recapture it. So all that to say, here in Southern Nevada, we do have a ban that went into effect in 2024, where the last building permit for an evaporative cooling in a commercial building was issued. And that's something that, lawmakers are looking at and could potentially apply to the whole state.
I actually am just curious because you mentioned that more data centers are coming to Southern Nevada. How many are already being built here? How many have been approved? Give us a sense of the scale of what is coming down the pipeline and maybe has already landed.
Yeah, there's a few dozen here that were built before that evaporative cooling ban went in.
A few dozen. Okay.
Yeah. And, in Northern Nevada, it's being called one of the, with the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center in Story County, one of the biggest markets in really the world for data centers.
Wow. Okay, here's my other question just specific to Southern Nevada, because, if you drive around Southern Nevada, you'll see these giant kind of warehouse buildings with the Switch logo on the side. I think every Las Vegan knows about Switch.
Right.
Switch has been around for a while, but it hasn't drawn nearly as much controversy as these new data centers that are coming in. And why is that?
Yeah, I mean, some of these data centers do have a near zero water footprint. We heard, Southern Nevada Water Authority General Manager John Ensminger say at this latest hearing that there's a data center being built that he has little to no concern about because it isn't really increasing our footprint at all here in Southern Nevada. So any new data center that is being built, whether it's Switch, Nova, Google, those, at least in terms of the water footprint, they will not be allowed to be built here if they are using those outdated technologies.
Okay, so is Switch also doing AI processing? Is that part of their model as well? So Switch is just one of the companies, alongside Google, alongside Nova, as you mentioned, that are doing kind of AI work for our new AI obsession.
Yeah, there's these big cloud storage facilities, and whether or not AI plays into each specific company, I think really anything that we do on our phones nowadays requires this technology. So there's this big need and demand. But I think the bigger question is at what cost?
Yeah. I think I'm trying to get a sense of like how boomy is this boom? So I guess if you can help us understand how much data centers have grown in Southern Nevada, like in terms of numbers, in terms of like, I don't know, power usage, square footage, like give us a sense of the scale.
In 2024, and this is statewide, the Integrated Resource Plan showed that NV Energy, which is our main utility here in Southern Nevada and in the Reno area, they would have to double their capacity on the grid. And that has since exploded. We heard the Western Resource Advocates, which is a nonprofit in the West, they did their own analysis, and they say that number in the 2026 Integrated Resource Plan will be 4 times the capacity that we have right now. And this is really an existential problem that I think our utilities are facing, both in rural Southern Nevada and in NV Energy.
I think we all know, we've seen the headlines that data centers around the country are using a lot of water, right? And then they're also releasing water that maybe isn't as clean as it should be, potentially, according to a lot of reporting around the country as well. So water is really a really controversial topic. And I can only imagine here, as you've mentioned in your reporting, in the driest state of the country, it's become even more critical. But you're saying that these new data centers are not using as much water. Why is that? Like, what exactly technologically is going on that they don't have to use that much water? Are they just, I don't know, sitting around with paper fans and fanning their machines rapidly, like hiring high school interns or something?
Well, they call it a closed loop system. So the water that they do use, it gets really hot when it cools off the data center, and then it is moved away and it cools down. And it is a closed loop in the sense that the water isn't being allowed to evaporate. That is kind of the new push, I would say, that we're seeing here in Southern Nevada with the newest one with Nova. There is a lot of innovation being spurred because of this evaporative cooling ban we have here in Southern Nevada. And
interesting.
Like I said earlier, it is kind of shifting our concern maybe a little bit more to energy, but at least on the water space, I think we have tighten that down, and that's something that they're considering implementing on a statewide level.
That's interesting. Okay, so this is actually making me think about how Southern Nevada Water Authority has become like a model of water conservation for districts around the country.
Right.
This evaporative cooling ban, like you said, has spurred this innovation. Is it possible that data centers here in Southern Nevada could actually be a model for water usage in other data centers around the country or even the world?
I would say yes. I think it was interesting to hear from the industry perspective in the last legislative hearing, because we heard, claims made that a lot of these numbers that we see parroted on social media really do, they're outdated. They don't take into account that there are, so many of these data centers that already have kind of sworn off evaporative cooling. So whether or not that's the truth, I think really varies about geographic location or what company that we're talking about. But, I would also maybe offer that we're kind of 5 to 10 years late as a state to actually putting in some of these safeguards to ensure that utility bills don't go up for the average ratepayer, that huge amounts, millions, hundreds of millions of gallons of water aren't being lost.
When you say late, it's because some data centers have already been built with evaporative cooling. Is that why?
Right. And, I would also say that there are other states that have taken a hard look at this. Nearly every state in the West has already looked at some sort of proposal to insulate their residents from these costs.
Okay. I guess the other issue is that data centers will need some amount of water no matter what. It's not like they're going to be completely zero usage, right? Are there concerns that this could impact Colorado River negotiations, which I know are sort of ongoing and fraught?
Yeah, I would say so. I think when we talk about Colorado River negotiations, we talk about it in the big picture. Things like water recycling or regulation aren't necessarily always a part of the conversation. And that's really one of the criticisms that people have. We talk about the water that exists, the very limited water that gets lesser and lesser every year, but we don't talk about adding water to the system or regulations that, like for data centers, for instance, that could require the things that could be adding water to our supply, like water recycling or desalination, aren't necessarily a part of those conversations always.
The Las Vegas Academy of the Arts, or LVA, is a 12-time Grammy Award-winning high school, the most of any high school in the nation. And the LVA Music Conservatory faculty are performing in a special fundraising concert on Monday, April 20th at 6 p.m. in the Loudon Theater. Mark your calendars. The goal is to raise $50,000 for a 9-foot Steinway Model D concert grand piano. Their existing concert piano is beyond repair, and this opportunity is due to a partnership with Southern Nevada Music. There are multiple ways to support. You can attend the concert, you can donate, there's even a silent auction, and you don't have to actually go to the concert to donate or participate in the silent auction. There's some very cool things you can bid on, including a live local caroling event. You can get the mariachi band to come perform for you, get a jazz song dedication. What a great gift. And my personal favorite, you could actually, on stage, guest conduct one of their orchestra performances. So visit www.lasvegasacademy.net to purchase tickets, donate, access the silent auction, and support LVA students. Every ticket, donation, and bid brings us one step closer to giving these talented students the instruments they deserve. Okay, so we've been circling around this a bit. You know, we talked about like how the power use here is the issue. So if the water footprint of our data centers in Southern Nevada is less concerning, what makes the power use more concerning?
You know, with these massive power demands, there's these open questions about where exactly that power is coming from, right? And more often than not, it is not clean energy sources, and it will be adding greenhouse gas emissions to the atmosphere.
But can you tell me why? So if these, is that kind of like a one-to-one? Like basically, if a data center uses less water, does it necessarily use more electricity?
That is what I've been told by experts, yes.
Wow. Okay. So there really is a trade-off here.
Yeah, so we've seen reporting that NV Energy is considering adding to the bottom line with natural gas plants, and that isn't necessarily an entirely clean source of energy, and that really does call into question our goals as a state. We have laws on the books that require that 50% of all energy generated by our utilities by 2030 should be from renewable sources. And there's also a mandate for an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. But there really is no enforcement as to what the penalty is if we do not meet those goals. And I think if you're concerned about climate impacts, there are real questions here about how this contributes to our state, driest in the nation, 2 fastest warming cities by climate scientists. And really, what if we're talking about responsible siting, is Nevada the place where we want to put these data centers?
So I'm just curious, do you think this will lead to more solar, or is it more drill, baby, drill?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the question, right? We saw our congressional delegation talk about the Interior Department's secretarial order that they say hampered solar development in our state. We saw Governor Lombardo say that as well. I think what I'm hearing on the ground, especially, out towards Death Valley and the Amargosa Desert, is that a lot of these solar applications are moving forward. And the quote is really, the freeze has thawed. When you're building a data center and you're concerned about where the energy is coming from, and if there isn't that infrastructure existing in the state, maybe a potential solution is to build your own types of clean energy, whether that's solar or geothermal. And that's something we've seen other companies do in the state before, and potentially have sort of a net benefit for that community that you're situating yourself inside of.
I see. So if a data center, for example, built their own solar farm, it could actually have excess power that it could share with the community around it, which maybe is a better way of approaching your neighbors than, hey, we're going to steal all your water.
Yeah, it's something that we saw with Google. They had a partnership with Fervo, which is one of the main geothermal players in Nevada. And they added 115 megawatts to the grid for NV Energy, in addition to having their own power generations for their data center.
Okay. But as you mentioned earlier, there are concerns that these data centers could actually raise people's power bills. Can you explain the mechanisms of how that works and why?
Sure. Yeah, there are questions about we do need this rapid build out of our infrastructure. Who pays for that, right? And there are other states that, like Oregon, for instance, that have considered putting data centers into their own utility class, which really does shield our ratepayers from having to pay for building out this grid. We saw NV Energy recover the costs of building Greenlink, for instance, the massive transition line that is going from the Las Vegas area to outside Reno. That's something that our ratepayers are paying for. It just comes through incremental increases in fees that of course are regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. But
So is it because NV Energy basically is building out infrastructure, they're building out capacity, and they're passing those costs on to the consumer?
correct. I mean, that's typically the way that it works.
Okay, so you've mentioned a few solutions here. One is separate rate class that happened in Oregon. Another one is on the private front where Google built out their own kind of energy infrastructure and then shared it with their neighbors like good neighbors do. What are some other solutions you're hearing about that kind of make you think that this could help mitigate the potential impacts on our pocketbooks?
Well, on the energy piece, one of the things that's thrown around a lot is this idea of a clean energy tariff. And essentially what that means is, exactly what happened with Google. That could be a requirement, right? You're required as a tech company to build out some sort of infrastructure yourself and insulate those costs to your company. That would have a net benefit for the community. So and have that energy be clean and not add to the greenhouse gas emission bottom line. So that's something that they're looking at. I think if we see anything come out of the 2027 legislature, just based on my conversations that I'm having with lawmakers, I would say probably the evaporative cooling ban is something that they're going to introduce. I don't know how far it's going to go or how it will be received by a Republican governor. But I think it's something that they're really feeling the heat about. There's this big panic and scare when it comes to data centers. I would say look out for that in this next session next year.
Yeah. So speaking of the legislature, I mean, what else are you hearing in your conversations? Like what other possible, I don't know, solutions or laws that could be put into place could help, I guess, deal with this boom of data centers? Are Nevada's laws even ready for this boom and this build out?
Well, I think that data centers and tech developers have largely flown under the radar in Nevada.
It's not a sexy topic. Let's be real. It's pretty dry.
Yeah, and until there was this, I guess, sense of, oh my gosh, there could be a data center that comes in next to my home that pollutes my water, takes my water, raises my utility bill. It wasn't really a present threat for people until it kind of did reach those national headlines. And it will remain to be seen, what the response is like from the industry. I think we heard, both sides say guardrails are good because it helps the industry understand what, the rules of the game, so to speak, are.
Sure.
It helps them maybe understand, instead of just issuing all of these speculative requests for power or water or whatever it may be, they can maybe better focus their energy elsewhere in other states if Nevada isn't the place for data centers.
Well, and case in point here in Southern Nevada, it helps them innovate.
Right, absolutely. And, even with solar, for instance, we've seen that technology, multiply in terms of what is possible. And we've seen, for instance, Ivanpah just across the California state line in Southern Nevada almost go out of commission because the technology really didn't catch up. So I think that's also a fear for folks is like, if we allow these data centers or solar or whatever it is to come in and use our resources, are we going to see that benefit come in 5 to 10 years when, innovation is really happening so fast in these spaces? So it's an open question, right?
Yeah. Well, case in point in Boulder City, right? We're seeing that local pushback to a proposed data center out there. Any closing thoughts on Boulder City and what's happening with that project?
There has been, quite a bit of pushback in Boulder City. And it's interesting, right? Because it's the home of Hoover Dam, home of Lake Mead, kind of on the front lines of the water crisis we have here in the West. And not many people know, but Boulder City is the only Southern Nevada Lake Mead user that doesn't recycle its wastewater like other cities.
Really?
Yes, it is left to evaporate mostly in ponds. And that's something that the Water Authority is looking at. But I spoke with the mayor, and that's something that they're hoping, those two problems could solve themselves. They're hoping to use some of that wastewater to potentially use for cooling in the data center. People are worried. The mayor told me that they will not be allowing the data center to use power from the city-owned utility, which Boulder City has. And according to the Change.org petition that's circulating, that has about 1,900 signatures, it's about 22 times the residential use of Boulder City is what this data center would need.
Wow. Wow. It really does feel kind of like a David and Goliath kind of situation, though, like tiny Boulder City, this giant data center. I mean, the narrative is like right there, but it'd be interesting to see if there's a partnership that can come out of this that really benefits everyone. I mean, who knows?
Another interesting part of it is Boulder City has this swath of land in the El Dorado Valley that it's stated in their city charter that they have to, whenever there is a new land use that they want to, potentially lease out to as a city, they have to put it before voters. So that's something that we're going to see this November on whether, this small town, like you're saying, in Southern Nevada is going to approve data centers as a potential acceptable use for the El Dorado Valley. And this is separate from, this data center that is currently being proposed that is within the city limits. But more than likely, from what I'm hearing, it will be a resounding no.
Interesting. All right. Well, we'll be following that news. I'm sure you'll be following that news come November. Alan, thank you so much for joining us today on CityCast Las Vegas.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, go tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. Don't forget you can support this show and get some great perks by becoming a CityCast Las Vegas neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Take care.